let's get rolling here. Let's talk through the agenda real quick. So obviously, like Kelly said, today's webinar is focused mostly on signature workflows. So when it comes to not just signature workflows, but any kind of workflow that we're looking at staging inside of Podio and Podio Workflow Automation, we always want to map out and kind of think ahead of our process, right? What is it we're trying to achieve? What are the steps in the process, and what do we need that to look like? So I've gone ahead and done that for a couple scenarios that we'll go through live in today's webinar. We'll talk through how I've got things configured on the Podio side. So as many of you know, there's a lot of different ways to kind of trigger a process that might involve a signature workflow inside of Podio. So we'll show a couple of examples, but certainly it's not an exhaustive list of examples. We'll go into workflow automation, and we'll first talk about adding our RightSignature account to workflow automation. So workflow automation, for those of you that aren't familiar, does have a native integration to both ShareFile and to RightSignature. So we'll show you how to do that. And then we'll walk through a couple of different scenarios, like I said, where we're going to configure workflows to leverage documents that are either housed in RightSignature as a template or created as a PDF by our workflow automation. And both of those will be sent by workflow automation for signature. All right, so let's talk through our first business process. So again, one of the core pieces of, Podio and Podio Workflow Automation, that we see quite often is the ability to route documents for signature. And so what's really cool with Podio and Podio Workflow Automation, as some of you know, is that I can trigger a document to be created or populated with data from Podio, and then I can send that document to be sent for electronic signature. But I can also track the signature of that document and then come back and tell Podio to do something else or to take the next step. So in this first use case, and what I'll walk you through the build out of is just a very simple loan application scenario. And you guys can pick on my loan application process. It's not very robust. I know there's a lot of fields and data that would typically be missing in a real life, loan request and review. But for purposes of this demo, what we're going to do, we're going to kick things off with a web form request. As many of you know, with web forms in Podio, those can create new items. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of work through a little bit of a scenario where we say, okay, if that new request is approved, what we want to do is we want to populate an existing RightSignature template with data from Podio, and we want to send that out for e-signature. So once that is signed and received, it will come back and it will, update Podio and let us know that our status is now signed. From there, if you wanted to, you could do things like create a next steps email, create a task, whatever that next piece of your process, or in this case, loan application process, would be. So let's go ahead and let's jump over to Podio. And you'll see here I've got just a very basic workspace with a single application. So if I come over here and look at my application, I'll kind of walk you through, I'll open one up and walk you through the fields that I've got, just so we can get a feel for how things are set up on the Podio side. So again, the way I did this is to keep in mind that we're initiating this entire process by a web form submission, which we'll do a new one here in a second. But what I've done is I've kind of separated this out into two sections. I've got my section here that contains all the information that will be submitted by our loan requester, the application requester in the web form. And then I've got a section up here where I can see things like status. I can record a reason for rejection. And ultimately, I can decide what the approved amount and the approved term in months should be. So this is just a very simple setup. Like I said, if you're in the process of, building out larger contracts or some of these, financial workflows, there are probably a lot more steps than what you'll see here. But again, the goal is to really demonstrate and show you how we went about building out, this process for signature specifically. So that's our Podio build out. What I want to do real quick is pivot over to workflow automation, because before we do anything on the Podio side, like submit a new request, I want to make sure I've got things set up on the workflow automation side. So again, the Podio setup is pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to workflow automation, and I'm going to come down, and you can see here I've got a couple of different workflows, 3 different workflows tied to this process. Now, before I built these workflows, one thing I needed to make sure is that I've got my RightSignature account authenticated to workflow automation. So in order to do that, I came over to account and I went to account details. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see these options for integrations. What I did is I just clicked, at the time it said configure, I just clicked configure for RightSignature. It pops open, the dialog for your subdomain and then your credentials. Once it does that, it will sync, any templates or anything you've got, and it will be available for use here in workflow automation. So that was kind of the first step I made in workflow automation, was to connect my RightSignature account. Now, in this scenario, again, keep in mind what I want to do is I want to leverage an existing document template. So I'm not going to create the document. I'm going to leverage an existing document template that exists in RightSignature. So if I pop over to RightSignature, this is the legacy RightSignature interface. And you can see here, I've got my documents list and I've got templates. So what I did here, I've got my loan agreement for my demo, is I clicked create template. And what that did is it let me create the document and start to bring in what's called merge fields. So merge fields inside of this template are actually fields that I'll be able to populate with data from Podio. So what's really nice about this is as I create these merge fields, so if we go ahead and edit this, just so you can see this process, I'll go ahead and prepare the document. What roles? I'm only going to have the applicant sign this, so we'll just do a single signature here. But what I did is I populated these things with text fields, and down further you'll see the signature fields. But what I did is I set these up as merge fields. So I did a merge field. It's just called Bauer's name, so I'm able to map that back to my field in Podio very easily. And I went through and I created this for each of these fields that I want to populate with Podio data. So we'll see here, I've got my borrower name. If there is a business name, that will populate. I've got my loan amount, my loan term. All of those are fields that, again, we're housing over in the Podio side. So I've got my amount, my terms. We've got the name. You'll see here it's got a business name. So all of those fields have been mapped over to my template in RightSignature. So once I go through and I create all of these fields that I want, I'm going to click next. I can change the name of the agreement or the template. I can also, create a message here, a custom message for the user that they'll see when they get the email with the link to the e-signature document. And in this case, I'm just going to update the template. So we've got that available. So what's really cool is now in workflow automation, if I come back over to my flows, let's go ahead and let's just create a new flow just so you can see this. If I start to search for the actions for RightSignature and I pick send a right template, I'll now see that that agreement is available to be selected. So if I go ahead and select that, we'll see now those merge fields that I just created in RightSignature are now available for me to populate with data from my Podio environment. So let's do this. Let's pop over and let's look at that workflow as it exists in this setup. So what I've done here is I've basically said when I move the status to status approved, what I want to do is grab that RightSignature template and I want to populate these fields with data from Podio. So my loan term in terms of months, my loan amount, I'll come back to that in just a second, my borrower's business name, their name, the applicant's name, the applicant's email. So we see everything that I just created in RightSignature is now available for me to populate here from the workflow automation side of things. Now I continued the workflow to say, once this thing is done, once I click approve and this document is sent, I want this to update my signature status to sent So again, if I've got a number of these things that I'm looking at day in and day out, I can build filters and reports based on this field. And I'll also, just for fun, add a comment to let me know that, hey, this loan agreement did in fact go out to this individual. Now, real quick, coming back to the loan amount, the reason I've got a variable here is that if we go ahead and actually add another one real quick, and I go get that amount from Podio. So if I grab the approved amount, you'll see it's formatted, even though in Podio it's a money field with a $ and a comma for the thousands, in the 2 decimal places. You'll see that it still only passes it through as an integer here to Podio Workflow Automation. So all I'm doing with this variable is I'm just formatting that dollar amount to add the $, add the thousand separator, add the 2 decimals, so that then when it comes out in the document itself, it'll be formatted correctly. Kind of a nitpicky thing, but it's one of those things that we run into quite often. So you're able to format that money field coming from Podio so it looks exactly the way you want. So let's go ahead and let's save this workflow. And let's go ahead and run that real quick. Or actually, sorry, let's go back and review the last workflow, and then we'll run through the entire process. So once I've sent the loan agreement out for signature, what I've also done is I've added a new flow, and its trigger type is RightSignature document signed. So if I go ahead and take a look at this one, excuse me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this flow so that it knows when a document goes out from a Podio item, and that document is then signed in RightSignature, what it will do is it'll come back to that item. It'll mark that item's status as signed, and it will add another comment, to our comment thread, just to let us know that this agreement was signed, and we can go ahead and start doing whatever it is we need to do with the next steps in the process. So the other thing that's really nice about this is it will also attach a copy of the signed document to our Podio item. So again, with a very basic setup in Podio and just a couple of workflows, I'm able to create, this back and forth where I'm able to take in a request, create a new Podio item, review and approve it, have that approval, send that out for signature, have the user sign that e-signature document, and then track that status back into Podio. So let's go ahead and let's actually run through that. Make sure my email is still there. So let's come back to this page. Now here's my web form that I've got set up. So I'm just going to come in. Let's just call this test company 2. Let's use a test Gmail account. Let's say this is business. Let's say I'm requesting 50,000. And probably not going to get approved, but we'll just go ahead and submit this anyways. So our web form is submitted. And with Podio, obviously, if you've used web forms before, now we see our new request has come in. So we'll let everything kind of build out. So we'll see here our loan status was auto set to new. I can review these details. Obviously, again, if you're doing a full-blown loan review and loan agreement, there's going to be all kinds of tasks and vetting and document collection that we didn't include in this workflow because we want to focus on how to set up the signature flow. But for purposes of this one, what I'm going to do is let's just pretend that I mark this as in review, and I go sit with the underwriters and look at all the bank statements and loan documents and things like that that are pertinent to the review. And let's say that we all agree on an amount and we're ready to approve this. So what I can do is I can say, you know what, we agree, to approve a $45,000 loan, and we're going to make this over 60 months as well. I'm just going to put in 60 months. So I've got my data in there. Now what I'm ready to do is I'm ready to send this off through my template and RightSignature for signature by our user here. So I'm going to click approved. And we should see the status move to sent, our comment that the loan agreement has been sent. And I should see this come through my email here in just a second. So here's my document. We scared it out into the open. So I can come in as the user now, and I can review and sign my document. So what I'm going to do is you can see here it populated it with the data from Podio that we pulled in via our merge fields. So we've got everything there. And now what I'm going to do as the user is I'm just going to do my best pretend signature with the trackpad. And I'm going to submit. And what that'll do is, as the user, I'll get another email letting me know that, hey, thank you for signing the document. You can download a copy of it. But if I come over here to Podio, we'll see now that this has been marked as signed. We'll see a file has been added. So actually, if I refresh real quick, the file went to 2 places because I had a comment. It added the file to the comment, but the file is now attached to the Podio item as well. So if I come in, I can see my loan agreement. I can see everybody signed, and I've got my signature certificate as well. So again, the nice part about this is by leveraging that, my Teams thing is in the way there. There we go. By leveraging this flow to go capture the signature completion, it's really nice because we can kick off all kinds of additional processes, inside of Podio via workflow automation. So it could be, a series of tasks or whatever it is that, might move this application to the next step. It's really cool that we can go grab that signature document and use that as a trigger. So that is just a very simple kind of back and forth with our example loan agreement. So here's my, as my user, here's my agreement that was completed as well. I'll jump into the next scenario here. Speaking of document creation. In our next business process, so what we're going to do, this is just a simple lead to contract. This was something we built out a while back just as an internal demo. Again, this will start with a web form submission. And our scenario is it's a new inbound lead. If we mark the lead status as qualified, it'll create a contract item in a contract app. But what's cool is within that contract application, rather than using the data in those fields in the contract to send to an existing template, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build a PDF inside of Workflow Automation that will then be sent for e-signature. So very similar to what's happening before, except this time we're going to build the document inside of Workflow Automation. So web form submission goes to new lead is qualified. If it's qualified, it creates a new contract in Podio. You'll see I've got just a couple of simple buttons to create the contract and then send the contract. But what that'll do is it'll, generate the document itself, send the document for signature. Once that document is signed, it'll come back and update our Podio status. And in this case, then we have it kick off just a templated next steps email to the user with what to expect next. So again, the document could be most anything. The next steps after the document is signed could be most anything. But what we'll focus on here, given the poll, is kind of the couple of different ways we can go about building a PDF with workflow automation. All right, so let's come back over here and let's get rid of that one. And just so I can keep all these straight, let's get rid of that. Okay, so this workspace has 3 apps like we talked about. The core 2 apps is going to be our lead intake app. So this is how we're going to capture a lead from the web form. Our contract app, if we go take a look at this, we'll see here that we've got some different fields. So we've got a value, contract details, and the contract effective date. All of those will be used in our document that we're going to send for signature. Now, what's a little bit different than this is there's a couple of different ways to build out the contents of your document in workflow automation. So let's actually go over here real quick and let's look at our workflow called build contract. So if I go open this up and walk through the process, you'll see it looks like there's a lot of extra stuff here. the beginning is pretty straightforward. So when an item is updated, if the contract actions is changed and it's build contract, what I could actually do is I could skip right to this action called create a PDF, and I could go ahead and build out the PDF in this action, by putting all of the contents directly here. So again, like any other action in Podio, it can see all of my Podio fields from, in this case, my contract application, and I could go build that entire thing out here. Now, what's a little bit different, what I've done here, and this isn't the way you have to do it. Certainly, lots of times contracts are very static. We know we're not going to be updating them a lot. We will go ahead and put the actual contract or document contents in here. What we did in this case is we've got this settings app. And this settings app really contains a couple of things. So you'll see here, this is going to be the actual body of our PDF. Rather than have this in, in the content of our create PDF action, I've actually got it stored in a Podio app, because if I want to change it, it's easier to go to a Podio app and make those changes as opposed to come over and find the workflow, find the action, make the changes, save it. It's just a preference thing in this case. But because I did that, you'll see here in my document settings, I've got tokens like name, date, value, and details. And I've also got an image link that we're going to include. So what I've done here in this workflow is fairly straightforward when you dig into it. I've gone and searched for that specific item in our settings app. So I went and searched for this item. That now allows me to use all of the data from that item. I'm going to go get our related lead, and then I'm going to create a few variables. I'm going to create a variable for our logo using the image link. Again, kind of going back to that dollar amount formatting, I'm going to create a formatted version of that dollar amount. I'm actually going to change the format of the date as well. Again, kind of a nitpicky thing. In Workflow Automation, it usually passes things as year, month, day, I believe. I want to switch it to month, day, year. So I'm going to go ahead and make that switch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a PHP variable to go ahead and replace all of those tokens that I've got here, all of these text strings, name, date, value. I'm going to replace those with the actual, data points from our contract. So again, you don't have to do it this way. This is just a way to centralize some of the settings and content inside of a Podio app. I could have very well come in here and just built out all of my content, for my contract in the PDF creation, and put all of those Podio fields alongside of that. But what's really cool is that once I go ahead and create that contract, I can send it. So whereas the first workflow example, we were using the action send via write template, now what we're going to do is we're going to use a different action, and we're going to say, we want to send this file via RightSignature. And so what we're doing is we're telling it, grab the most recent PDF, which would be the one that we're creating, and we want to send that to the user's name, to their email address, and we want the subject to be, we've got this already set up in a setting. You could make this whatever you want. And we can put in a custom message, please sign this contract. We can change this, please review and sign this contract. We can dictate whether or not both parties sign. And actually what's kind of cool is this little expires is fairly new as of a couple of weeks ago. Now I have the ability to come in and choose how long it will take before this document expires. So, I can change this to 3, and after 3 days, that document will have expired and they won't be able to go in and try and sign it anymore. So you can adjust that setting here in the workflow now. And then what I'm doing is once I send that out, you'll see here I'm marking a date. I'm tracking the date that the contract is sent as the current date, and the contract status will be out for review. And then again, what I've got in addition to that is a couple of workflows to say when the document is signed. We want to update some fields, and we're actually going to trigger a manual email. This email is just a confirmation email. So once this document is signed, we're going to turn around and send the user an email to confirm that we've received it and tell them what the next steps are. So with all that being said, let's actually just walk through the process on the Podio side, and we'll see what that looks like. So let's come back out here and let's open up our lead intake form. So I'm going to do my name. Let's do that and let's submit. So what's happening now is it's creating a new lead. And again, it's just an extra step in this example. At the time, we were demoing also how to, leverage web forms for things like lead intake. You'll see my lead came in. It's very straightforward, just to demonstrate the ability to create, a contract that's related to this lead. I can click qualified, and what we'll see happen here is we'll see that create a new contract item that's then related back to our lead. So it created my new contract. I can click through and come over to that. And now we'll see I can start building out the contents of my contract. So let's say the value of this one is $25,000. Let's say these are the details I will place into my contract fields in the PDF. And let's say this will be effective as of Friday. So now where before I was clicking an approve button and it was sending that document that already existed, that template, out via RightSignature. What I'm going to do first here is I'm actually going to build the contract. So I'm going to click build. And what we'll see here is we'll see the workflow go ahead and create the PDF and then attach the PDF to our record. So we can see the workflow went ahead and it created our contract just so it shows up down below. Our PDF is now attached. So if I come in and look at this, again, we'll see that it was grabbing all of those settings that we talked about in the workflows to go ahead and create this contract. So again, very simplistic, but you can really format these things in a number of different ways. This one's very simple. We're just going to grab the details, the dollar amount, the cost effective date. But now what I want to do, now that I've got this PDF created, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this out for signature. So I'm going to click send contract, and we'll let the workflow take over. So you'll see it updated our status automatically to out for review. And we should see this come through. That was much quicker this time. So now as the user, I've got my email with my contract to review and sign. I can come in. So there's my PDF that I created as part of the workflow engine. Put in my name, the date, submit. So now that I've completed that, same process as before, we'll see this come back and update this as signed. We'll see our sign date, and we see it attach a copy of the signed document. So if I refresh, now our status is signed. We'll see this is the document signed with the signature certificate. So we've got that. And what we also did, if I get my email back here, is this is the document or the email confirming the document's been signed with a copy of it. But what I also did is I also staged, just a template email to go out via the workflow engine as part of the next steps. So again, just to give you an example of how you can chain these events in a workflow together. And so now this one's complete. We can come out and, like with anything in Podio, we can start to track and report on things, by status and other fields. So again, just a fairly straightforward example. I'm using this demo settings app to structure my PDF. But again, if I come over to the workflows and I go to build contract, you can certainly come in here into the create PDF action block, and you can adjust, all of that content as you see fit. The other cool thing I didn't get into is you can actually edit the underlying HTML. So if there's things you want to format or do, if you're really proficient in HTML, you can do this here. If you're less proficient, you want to leverage something like ChatGPT or Copilot, you can take the source HTML right out of here, go make adjustments, in some kind of AI model, bring that HTML back in and update it and test with it that way. So again, I've seen a lot of customers create some really cool looking documents, as part of this workflow action to create the document itself. So